welcome to News Time, where we discuss comics, movies, games, and more. And today I'm going to be reviewing Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, I gotta say, is this a good Spider-Man film? Yes. Does it have its problems? Yes. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about that throughout this review. So Spider-Man Far From Home stars Tom Holland, Jake Gyllenhaal, Samuel L. Jackson, and various other actors who are in this movie. And I gotta say, it's a pretty good movie. It does have its problems, which I'll get into real quick. But first, let me go ahead and point out the good things that I really liked about this movie. Obviously, the performance, including Tom Holland himself, the main character, who looks like he's always having a good time playing the role of Peter Parker Spider-Man. John Watts returns to direct this movie, and he did a pretty decent job. I really liked his approach with Spider-Man Homecoming. This one, not so much, but then again, a lot of good does come out of it, and I'll explain in a second. The narrative is pretty straightforward and simple. Peter Parker is a kid who's pretty much gone through a lot of traumatic experiences. The guy was just basically vanished from Avengers Infinity War. He came back in Endgame, and this movie immediately takes place right after that film. So he kind of feels like he's stressed out, and he kind of just wants to take a break and go on vacation and spend some time with his friends, and he especially wants to spend a lot of time with MJ. In this movie, the abrupt crush of Peter Parker having on MJ, at first I didn't buy it, but as the film progressed, I started to buy it because the chemistry on screen between Tom Holland's Peter Parker and Zendaya's MJ was pretty cute. I'll admit that. I kind of bought it later on in the film, but just the abrupt feeling of Peter Parker wanting to be with MJ and spending time with her, it's like, I was having a hard time of buying that. That's one little problem that I have. And it's just, you can call it nitpicking, but it's a little minor nitpick. I'm not going to go ahead and spoil this movie because I know some of you guys haven't seen this movie. Remember, I'm just going to do this spoil-free review film. Now, the character of Mysterio and some other various characters, they've gone ahead and taken liberties with that character and sort of came up with their own interpretation of the character, along with combining some of the elements of the comics and mixing it into their film and kind of giving their own spin and twist, just like they did with the Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming. I kind of bought into the idea, but I was a little bit on the fence. But at the same time, the end result was pretty satisfying, and we pretty much got an overall good feel and representation of Mysterio on the film. And I liked it. And there's this one amazing sequence in this movie that I really, really enjoyed, that I'd love to go ahead and pay money to go and see that sequence again. Because this certain sequence, and I'm not going to say it, but you'll know it when you go see this movie, this sequence was incredibly mesmerizing and trippy, that it kind of reminded me of reading a comic featuring the Mysterio. And that was just awesome. Now, another problem that I did have with this movie is the obvious shadow of Tony Stark Iron Man casted over this entire film. This movie relies too much on the idea of Spider-Man being the next Tony Stark Iron Man, and honestly, I didn't really want that. I personally prefer the Spider-Man stories that are personal, smaller, and isn't overwhelmed by a lot of supporting characters, and that's pretty much why I prefer a lot of the films from Sam Raimi and The Amazing Spider-Man. The MCU kind of tends to really focus and build upon this universe idea, and they keep doing so with these movies, especially with Spider-Man. Now, to me, the Spider-Man that I knew and that probably everybody knows usually works solo and doesn't have to depend on anybody to get the job done. I mean, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with asking for help. Clearly, there's nothing wrong with that. But so far in the MCU, this Peter Parker seemed to be kind of incompetent throughout the entire course. And yes, you might say, well, that's the point. I mean, this is the MCU version of Peter Parker Spider-Man, who happens to be relying on people like Tony Stark and other adults that are clearly wiser and smarter than him or whatever. That's fine. I totally get it. But I kind of wish that that independency that we know from Peter Parker was applied to these movies, especially with Far From Home being the second solo Spider-Man movie. I kind of wish he was more like that, more aggressive, more independent, not having to rely on technology so much. But again, that's the way that Marvel Studios is heading in that direction for this character. I'm all for it. I mean, it is an enjoyable film. I really did like this movie. I just wish certain things were taken in a different direction. That's my only small gripe with the movie. Some liberties were taken with a few characters that I was kind of on the fence on. I didn't say that I didn't like it, which means that they've taken some liberties from the comics and kind of made it their own into the film, which I can really appreciate, but I was still on the fence on, but I still appreciate it. I know it's a bit of a mixed bag of feelings, but that's just the way I feel. And as for Tom Holland, I wish there was more of that level of independency in that character. We're already 5 films in, and the character still has this shadow of Iron Man, Tony Stark casted over him, and he keeps having to rely on people and technology and stuff like that. And it's just like, all right, we get it. You know, Spider-Man isn't Iron Man. He's Spider-Man. He's his own symbol. He's his own character. He's his own hero. He should be known as Spider-Man and not the next anything. And that's something that kind of annoyed me. And I hope it's something that we can forget, because Iron Man's dead and people just need to move on and not having to carry that weight over their shoulders. And those are my major problems with this film. Homecoming to me is the superior movie. It does have that cast of Iron Man, you know, level of like depending on other characters like adults like Iron Man and other people. But I think to me, the superior film is Spider-Man Homecoming. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and give Spider-Man Far From Home a B-. It does a great job with the characters and the performances, but my major issues with this movie were the relying of like other characters, especially Tony Stark's tech. And Jake Gyllenhaal delivered a great performance, as well as the character of Mysterio. Tom Holland always does a great job performing as Spider-Man, because when I see him, I think that's Spider-Man. He really knows how to act like the character. But as far as the direction they're taking the character and how they treat him, it's not my favorite direction. And I wish they can change a few things about it. And you will know those things once you go see this movie. Overall, it's pretty straightforward. It's a simple narrative. Kid wants to have a vacation. He doesn't want to be Spider-Man for a while. He just wants to take the weight of the responsibilities of being a superhero and just spend some time with his crush and his friends and have a good time. But trouble ensues, and he has to go ahead and face that trouble because he feels like he's responsible to do so. But overall, I think this movie is a great time. You will enjoy it, and I think it's a really good Spider-Man movie. As far as my rankings of best Spider-Man films from best to worst, Spider-Man 2, starting at number 1, of course, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man, Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, The Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man 3, and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That's my ranking. I'm going to go ahead and leave the ranking down in the description box below if you guys want to check that out. You let me know what's your ranking of the Spider-Man films from best to worst. Also, I'd like to hear your thoughts about Spider-Man Far From Home if you've already seen it already. I'm really curious to know about your thoughts and how do you feel. Were your opinions similar to mine, or do you just completely disagree? If you do disagree, please be respectful about it and comment down below. Other than that, I'd love to read your thoughts. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click on bell notifications so you all don't miss anything. As always, I will see you all in the next comic panel.